Hello, I'm your host, Giselle Gamby, and this is the Intuitive Pull podcast. First of all, I want to say thank you to the community of listeners because there have been breathtaking ripples that have occurred from listening to this podcast, and I'm excited to be witness of many, many more. This year, I'm dedicating this podcast to the theme of 2023 being a breakthrough year. No matter how successful, fulfilled, and happy we are, and the truth is that sometimes we're not, we all have thresholds we've placed on ourselves on how loving and powerful we've allowed ourselves to be. Following the intuitive pull does not negate our vulnerabilities and our humanness. Oftentimes, following the intuitive pull asks us to see our blind spots and to bring what has been in the shadow to light. And when we do, we can see that being fully human is in fact the precursor to remembering that we are infinitely greater than this mortal body, that we are infinitely connected beyond this time and space, not in spite of our humanity, but because of the intricate weaving of all aspects of our precious humanity. When we take responsibility and remember that you have the power to decide what you choose, and we fuse that with a letting go of control and surrendering into the plans that you didn't make, there is nothing that you cannot transform. My wish is that you see that the deeper you go, the greater your wealth in all ways, and that authenticity is always profitable. Have fun. Good morning. Happy Saturday for those who are listening to this podcast this Saturday morning. I want to start actually by letting you know that I received the intuition this week that I will no longer be charging for the 9-week meditation programs. And I feel so pulled to share the deliciousness of the experience of listening into the universal mind and aligning with the universal mind. I want to share that with as many people as possible. So I will no longer be charging for that. So if you would like to be part of the next 9-week meditation program, which will be commencing soon, please subscribe to my Substack newsletter because I will be putting it out through there. I will put details of how to do that in the show notes. Very simple. So that's the first thing I wanted to say. Now, the second thing that I want to say on this Saturday morning is that I feel really fiery this morning. And I've had what I've called a truth ache. Not my words, beautiful author Jeff Brown's words, a truth ache this week. And I was watching one of the participants in Sacred Leadership. I was watching their debrief video this morning and listening to the absolute vulnerability of her, listening to the discomfort, the overwhelm, the confusion, and the peace found within that, funnily enough, allowed me to see what the niggle was about this week. So the niggle, it was actually not even a niggle. It was more like a poke and a prod. It happened when I read a post on Facebook by somebody I know who said something like he is in so much gratitude for the ability to be in acceptance of what is in his life. And whilst that sounds honourable, it didn't fully resonate with me. And let's just say I smelt a spiritual bypass. So acceptance of what is absolutely necessary. If we are in judgment of what is, then that inner or outer circumstance that we are in judgment to actually has power over us. So whenever we are in judgment, we are, in other words, resisting what is. And as we resist what is, it persists and it has power over us. So if we want to shift and transform anything, the first and absolutely vital port of call is to be in acceptance of what is. And yeah, as my beautiful client was demonstrating on her video, that is exactly the place that she was in this week, in full acceptance of the discomfort, the overwhelm, the confusion. And she wasn't rushing that away or pushing that away. In fact, she was really, really being with what is. And I know what is going to happen on the other side of that. And I'll get to that in a minute. But watching her video this morning allowed me to see why I had been poked and prodded by that person's post, that they were in so much gratitude for being in acceptance of what is, how that has become part of their life. As I just said, being in acceptance of what is absolutely necessary if we want to shift or transform anything. But it doesn't stop there. And what I felt in that post was there was absolutely no agency to experience what that undesired circumstance is inviting us into in its contrasting reality in the bigger picture. We had our first 2-day get-together for Sacred Leadership, a graduate program that I started. It's a year-long program, and we came together for the first 2 days a few weeks ago. And the premise that we worked with that held us over those 2 days, and it's still holding us, as witnessed in my client's debrief video this morning, the premise that is holding us is that there is fire and strength found in absolute vulnerability. And when I say absolute vulnerability, I mean absolute vulnerability. I don't mean rushing things away, pushing things away, allowing ourselves to be a little bit vulnerable, wanting to move that feeling of vulnerability and the discomfort of that away quickly. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about absolute vulnerability. And being in absolute vulnerability means being in acceptance of what is. But the buck doesn't stop there. And if it did, if we go into acceptance of what is, and we just stay there, the strength and the fire of what wants to be let in would be totally amiss. Have you ever heard of the word spiritual bypassing? Again, Jeff Brown, the author, speaks a lot about that. And spiritual bypassers have a dodgy relationship with acceptance and also with detachment. Spiritual bypassers unconsciously redeem not the sacred power that is found on the other side of absolute vulnerability, but they redeem a sense of powerlessness. And the more they repeat this relationship with acceptance and detachment from this place of powerlessness, an absence of fire, an absence of vision, the more they find themselves in undesired situation after situation. So we don't surrender to what is, to all the discomfort and overwhelm and uncertainty and doubt and confusion to lose our sense of agency. We surrender into it because inherent in this is a power not of the psychological kind, but a power that is sacred. And this sacred power, if you like, has our soul's purpose imprinted in its DNA. Encoded in this sacred power is what we are here to experience in our fullest, most authentic selves. Encoded in it are the ripples of impact that organically flow by being in our fullest and most authentic selves. You see, we live in a relative universe, right? What goes up must come down. We live in a contrasting reality of desired experiences and undesired experiences, of inauthenticity and authenticity. And we only get to experience our fullest, most authentic selves by firstly experiencing the contrast of that. We only get to experience joy and freedom and peace by firstly experiencing the drama of life and the lack of that. And so to receive this contrasting reality, trust and faith are also ingredients combined with an acceptance of what is. Trust and faith that there is a bigger picture unfolding, and one that we can't rush either. But when it arrives, it is so sweet. We were on safari in Kenya a month ago, and I tell you what, we learnt so much from nature. I mentioned on a previous podcast that we watched lions, a group of adolescent lions slowly kill a buffalo, and it was really hard to watch. It was really hard to watch. But it taught us so much. It taught us that there was no apology by the lion to kill the buffalo. And it taught us that there was absolute vulnerability in that buffalo. It was a slow kill. As I said, it was very, very difficult to watch. And you know what? That buffalo didn't accept what is. That buffalo bloody kept fighting for his life. And in that circle of life that we saw, you know, there was no judgment. I mean, there was judgment in us at times, for sure, because it was hard to watch. But in nature, there was no judgment, because that kill of the buffalo would feed not only the lions, but it would feed the hyenas, the jackals, the vultures, all their families. And so we felt quite honored. Once we got past our judgment, we felt quite honored that nature would show us this. And, you know, the guides told us that this doesn't happen very often, that he may see this only, you know, once a month. So this was my 4th time going on safari. And on this 4th time, I got to see this experience, as hard as it was, but it taught us so much. In the context of accepting what is and a powerless relationship with that, the buffalo taught us the exact opposite. The buffalo continued to fight for his life. His hind legs, which the lion were feeding off and trying to render him powerless, he continued. It was full on to watch. He continued to fight for his life, even though his hind legs were not working. Now, we don't need to fight for our lives. Well, most of us do not. Some people do in their own circumstances, and thankfully, where I live in Australia and where most of us live, who I imagine are listening to this podcast, we don't need to fight for our lives, because we are gifted with a sense of agency, and we are gifted with a powerfulness to live the most meaningful life we've been offered to experience. And you know what? That is not a passive decision to live the most meaningful life, regardless of our circumstances. I mean, I work with people who have cancer. It's not a passive decision. It's an active decision that we have the power to make, to live the most meaningful life we've been offered to experience, in contrast to the undesired circumstances that we sometimes find ourselves in. And as I have spoken on previous podcasts, I have had the great honor to walk people to the moment of their passing. And even in the circumstance of their life coming to an end, I have witnessed such meaningfulness in their lives and such gratitude for what has transpired in their lives. And this could only happen because they made an active decision to suck the marrow, the sweetness out of life. And in contrast to that, I just have to say, you know, I've been on this spiritual journey for how long? 24 years. And I've attended a lot of programs, and I have seen too many spiritual bypassers live a very limp, unrealized life on an endless merry-go-round of seeking. And that is not the point of being here. So I was really fueled to write and to podcast this Saturday morning. Like I had a fire within me to remind people that, yes, acceptance of what is part of the transformation process. It is vital. And to feel all the feelings, as uncomfortable as they are, and not to rush them away. but to remind you that there is fire and strength found in the other side of that. And the fire and strength might be a much deeper love of self. And that would be whole and complete in itself if that is where this absolute vulnerability was leading to. And it also might lead us to other places of when we love ourselves more deeply and accept and value ourselves more deeply. There's vision born from that. There's vision born from absolute vulnerability. And there's decisions. I saw it on the Sacred Leadership Program. I saw decisions made from a place of self-love that had people say, no, I'm not going to do that thing anymore. I'm not going to give my time and energy to that thing anymore because it's not the highest representation of my self-love. And so I hope that this very fired up podcast episode has been created because some of you who are listening needed to hear this. And if that is you, let me know, please. Please let me know. Just send me a little message or a little voice recording or an email, because it's really wonderful for me to not only produce these podcast episodes because I love doing so much, but it's also so wonderful for me to see the ripples. Have a beautiful weekend, everybody. Thank you. Ciao, ciao. Hey guys, if you love this podcast, I have 2 requests. Number 1, sign up to the newsletter, which you can find in the show notes. Sharing is one of my superpowers, and there is only so much that I can share through the medium of podcasting. And I have very big plans this year to be radically generous to you. So sign up to that newsletter where you will be able to receive a whole lot more that I trust will be super valuable to you. And number 2, I'm a massive referrer of the people I love to the people I love. Please share this episode or podcast with the people you love, and let's create some more breathtaking ripples of impact.